So we really need to stop reinventing the wheel and take the initiative of going biomimicry in the sense of finding what nature has provided for us and how it is intended to be used. It's a different way of looking at things. And so I hate to restrict it by saying, oh, well, I like this particular site. I would rather say, don't rely on me. Be your own researcher. You can teach yourself fairly quickly. Get access to a computer and just go.
Oh, that's what I tell folks all the time. The greatest encyclopedia ever invented right in front of you, your computer. And definitely learning natural healing methods is going to be one good trade. I think anybody who does it is going to be very beneficial to the community. Now, how about heirloom seeds? Have you found any company you really prefer, or?
I actually buy a lot through Bountiful Gardens, and I have a tendency to support organizations that are seed producers associated with the biointensive gardening method, because they are concentrating on heirlooms that can be closely crowded together. So, for instance, in my grow dome this year, we had a marvelous year for tomatoes. I had 2 and 3 pound tomatoes, very unusual here. And I had done it such that they were so closely packed together that there was no weeding issue at all involved, because they just literally crowded out the weeds. And I was using heirlooms that are the non-Luther Burbank version of Mortgage Lifter, and I think it's called Moneymaker. But I buy from Bountiful Gardens, Territorial Seeds. Territorial Seeds grows for the Pacific Northwest. We have particular issues up here. Low light levels, high moisture content, mold potentials, and these sorts of things. So not all heirlooms would be effective here. You've got to be a little bit more regional in your thinking about that. And again, start investigating biointensive growing, and I'm sure you'll find people in your area that are really into it and can say, oh, okay, I buy these seeds from this area, from this company, because they're good here. And, there are certain tomatoes, for instance, that are marvelous, but they really just don't grow out of the South. Try and get them to grow up here north of 40, and it's just not going to happen due to mold or blight or these kind of things.
So, well, I forgot this. I'm going to jump back just a little. As we go into the revolution phase, how long is the revolution actually going to last, and then do we go into a point of rebuild? Is that relatively quick?
We have the revolution meme showing up from the Refusnik period. If you want to count that as the beginning of it, then it'll start this fall. We're seeing it right now as people refuse. And once they start becoming emboldened by their sheer numbers, then we can say, okay, the revolution is really in its more active mode. So let's just say that it begins with seriousness, with the government repression that begins in January of 2010. Then it'll last at least through the next 19 months. So all of 2010 and into 2011. The problem for our forecast is that it appears that it is subsumed in a greater planetary struggle that we're calling alien wars that comes into existence in the latter half of 2011. And so I can't tell you that the revolution is ended, so to speak, because it becomes blocked or hidden or occluded by the larger mass of data that are going towards this strange concept that we're calling alien wars. One way to think of it is that maybe we're all scrapping and fighting around here, and an alien show up. Whether or not we actually go to war with aliens is immaterial from the linguistics viewpoint that we have here. But there will be war at the time. There will be the potential for war with the aliens, and the aliens will be there. So the language is just being labeled as alien wars. The rebuild portion does exist. We do go into a Renaissance period, but the earliest point that we can say the Renaissance really kicks off is late in 2013. And it doesn't really have much of if you will, a continental-wide or national hold until sometime in 2017 or so. So we might be looking at a period of time that might, in a sense, resemble the rebuilding of or the electrification of the West and the Tennessee Valley Authority period in the U.S. But that would, again, not start really until late 2013 and won't really take hold until 2016-17. So it's going to be a rough decade ahead of us,
The proverbial from the Bible, having 7 years of grain stored, sounds like it might be a pretty good idea.
Sure does, yeah. And once you've got it, though, then you've got to figure out how to maintain it after that 7 years. We've got some real issues here with weather, climate, and changes at all levels, magnetism, changes in the planet as a whole, that are suggesting that basically, because of the pressures that are being exerted both on, if we looked at society as a thin plate of all these cooperating organisms like bacteria all growing on a giant petri dish, then our particular petri dish is being drained of resources by our sheer success at the same time that the petri dish itself is in some kind of giant magnetic vice from outside that's affecting us. So we're up against it. There's no question about it. Over these next 10 years, we're going to get into greater strain on the planet at an interplanetary level. All the planets are all exhibiting strange behavior. It is not going to lessen for a number of years, and it's going to put increased strain on the food issues. So I'm recommending that people go out and learn things, like gleaning, how to be really effective in raising food locally and not contaminating it, and how to store it. Also, though, I'm suggesting that we learn various different ways of making electricity, dealing with some of the other issues in our own healthcare, and becoming as self-sufficient as possible, because that appears that that's the general universal trend at the moment, that the pressures on the planet are precluding giant centralized government everything. The bigger the thing, in terms of centralization, the more it's under strain now. Our giant corporations are collapsing around our ears. Our giant financial system is also, and the more centralized and controlled it is, the more it appears to be going against this universal trend, which is decentralized for survival. If you're not producing it local, you may not be able to get it in the future, and if you become dependent upon it, well, there you go. You've got a real issue. So now is a brief period of time for us to get it together and start practicing some of this stuff in terms of growing our own food and learning to be as self-sufficient as possible, because we're going to need to do that in a serious way.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. The more independent you're going to be, the better off. So I don't know if you've seen ACE come out with that new windmill this year, and I think it's a brilliant, where they went away from the gears and they actually put the magnetic part on the end of the blades.
No, I haven't. Tremendous idea, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty brilliant. Northern Hydraulics has got it. And I think we have to move toward that. And hopefully, after this is over, everybody will learn to get away from, stop letting these lawyers rewrite everything to benefit the rich.
Well, we're at a natural progression. All things work in cycles. There's basically the idea, the powers that be would have you believe otherwise. They would have you believe that it's progress forever, linear progression, upward, always upward, maybe a few setbacks, but basically it's step up again and keep moving. Instead of the idea that everything is cyclic, growth levels at any population, any species you care to name, when they grow too much, they put a strain on the food supply, and then a bunch of them die off until that equals to the food supply again, or there's more food than the populace that feeds upon it, and then it grows up until it collapses again. And this is just the way that things appear to work in nature. We've stepped outside of that and have been able to augment our food supply by enlarging it and eating different things and cultivating and so on. So they like to project the idea that we're outside of the natural cycles, but that's not the case. Those cycles have just been transferred up a level because the universe is in its basic core fractal. So we are at that point where the strains are pushing us towards certain directions, and it really becomes necessary to learn to look at how universe is pushing us so that we can harmonize with those trends and not fight them. In other words, I don't think really, in spite of, I don't think it's a condition where if we all decided that the central government and the Federal Reserve, quote, bank, were good things, no matter how much we all had confidence and believed in it, would we be able to repair the system and project it forward into the future? We're at the end of that cycle, and it's just simply happening. And the universe is pushing us in a different way. From our viewpoint, it appears to be pushing towards decentralized, more self-organizing collective or tribal ways of thinking, and a little bit more towards self-sufficiency. So we need to start harmonizing with that, even though it necessarily means a reduction in our lifestyle. And the reduction is going to be weird. Because, for instance, some areas may not have electricity because of antiquated electrical conditions. We may not be able to afford to repair them if there's an accident. In many other cases, we may suddenly lack fruit, and we'll have to start eating a more seasonal diet. And suddenly we'll have to deal with things like, the diseases of vitamin C lack in terms of scurvy or rickets or this kind of thing, right? So it's going to be a return to a different world, but now we at least have the knowledge to jump ahead of that.
Oh, yeah. More people have the chance right now, if they're paying attention, to get the knowledge they need to survive. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, I meant to ask you last time, is there anything, the December 21st, 2012, it's going to be the end of the world,